Hey friends, we are back with Woods Runner again. We are going to be reading chapter 2 today. So, if it were me, I've already said this in the description box for the assignment. If you just want to go ahead and minimize this video or open a new tab and go to the Google Doc where the questions are, that way you can continue to listen to me read and you can fill out the Google Doc while I am reading, so that way you don't have to listen to me read the whole time and then go back and read the questions and be like, where, I know she said that, but I can't remember where. So that way, if you have the Google Doc in front of you while you are listening, then you'll be able to hear the answers as I'm reading them. Or if you want to listen to this more than once, totally up to you. I'm just trying to make your life easier. So I'm going to go ahead and read you the questions for today's readings. That way you'll know what to be listening for. Question number 1 says, what information did Isaac bring? Question number 2 says, who was at Samuel's house? And question number 3 says, what do you think Samuel meant when he said, everything in my world just got bigger? Explain. So be sure that when you're answering those questions that you use full sentences. So for the first one, what information did Isaac bring? Isaac brought the information that blah, 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 blah was happening. Or for the last one, it says, what do you think Samuel meant? I think Samuel meant blah, 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 blah when he said everything in my world just got bigger. So be sure that you're flipping those questions because some of y'all last week did not flip the questions. And make sure that you're also using my Google Doc assignment to answer for Wit and Wisdom and not for Miss Savage's Read Aloud. Those read alouds are just for enjoyment. There are no questions. So the Wit and Wisdom is where you're supposed to be answering the questions on. Okay, so moving right along. Woods Runner, Chapter 2. So go ahead and get that doc pulled up. Samuel had returned home from the forest the night before and found his parents sipping tea with Isaac, an old man of the forest who stopped by their cabin every few months while he was hunting. This time, though, he had news. He carried information about a fight in Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, where militia had fired on and defeated British soldiers. The battle had happened months before, all the way back in April of 1775. So, real quick, y'all remember we talked about this in class, Lexington and Concord. Isaac seemed to be made entirely of scraps of old leather and rags. He was bald and wore a ratty cap with patches of fur that had been worn away. He was tall and thin, and for many years had lived in a cabin some 20 miles to the east. He was so much a part of the forest that even his brief visits with Samuel's family caused him discomfort. He decided to move farther into the frontier when a wagon pulled by oxen came into the clearing near his cabin. The family was traveling westward looking for a piece of land to farm, and had chosen a spot not too far from Isaac's place. The family was, Isaac said, a crowd, and I knew it was time to move on, seeing as how I don't do particularly good with crowds of people. As he was taking his leave from the small shack where he had lived, the family had given him the scrap of paper, soft with wear from all the hands it had been passed through, so he could share the news with fellow travelers he met on his journey. They told him of the other events that they had heard along the way. He tried to remember the details, but admitted that he wasn't much for conversation. Since there was so much noise from the sprats, as it seemed a dozen of them, my thinker fuzzed up like bad powder, but my recollector might not be all it could be. But I think they said there was a fight at a place called Bunker Hill, and the Patriot militia got whipped there and sent running when they saw the bayonets on the British soldiers' muskets. He sat quickly sipping the evergreen tea he always carried, a brew made from pine and spruce needles. He swore it cured colds. He said he preferred it to foreigner tea from outside, but thank you, messes. The paper he had handed to Samuel's father, Olin, was a single sheet that had been folded and unfolded so many times it was near to falling apart. It had been printed on a crude press with wooden block letters, and it was smudged and hard to read. But there was a brief description of the fight at Lexington and Concord, and a drawing of figures firing muskets at some other figures that were falling to the ground. As Samuel studied the paper in his father's hands, he thought, everything in my world just got bigger. Two other families, the Clarks and the Overtons, pulled up in wagons. Isaac had spoken to them on his way to Samuel's place, and they wanted to hear what Olin had to say about Isaac's news. Samuel looked around the small cabin on the edge of the woods that was suddenly filled with people, all talking over each other about the meaning of the battles. It seemed that the strong and sturdy log walls no longer protected his family. The loud outside world his parents had escaped by moving to the frontier had found them. Samuel was excited and frightened and overwhelmed all at the same time. "What does it mean?" Ebenezer Clark asked Olin. His face was red and round as an apple because he drank home beer, 3 quarts every morning for breakfast. "It could be local, just some trouble in Boston," Samuel's father said. "A riot or the like. There's always a chance of rabble-rousing in the cities. And it doesn't seem likely that a group of farmers would try to take the entire British army." He paused, then added thoughtfully, "England has the most powerful army and navy in the world, and a gaggle of farmers would have to be insane to fight them." Likely or not, this from Lund Harris, a soft-spoken and careful man whose wife Clara sat nursing an infant. "If it happens, we have to think of what it means for us out here on the edge." Nobody spoke. Samuel could hear the crackle of the fire in the fireplace. In the homey, safe cabin, the craziness of the information from the east seemed impossible, but there was always some measure of violence on the frontier. Savages, drunks, thieves, evildoers, men who operated outside of the walls of reason. Harshness was to be expected in the wild, but nothing like this. Nothing that challenged the established order, the very rule of the crown, the civilized life that came from the English way of living. The very idea of fighting the British was too big to understand, too huge to even contemplate. These settlers had always been local to the rules of the land, obedient to the laws of the country that ruled them. Ben Overton stood. He was a tall, thin man whose sleeves never seemed to come to his wrists. He said, "Well, I think we should do nothing but wait and see how the wind blows." And with nods and a few mumbles of affirmation, the rest got up and went back to their own homes. Not a single person in that cabin could have known what was coming, and even if they had seen the future, they would have not been able to imagine the horror. Okay, that is chapter 2. So go ahead and answer those questions, and be sure you hit turn in or mark as done. I'm not really sure which one it says on your paper or on your screen, but make sure that you hit turn in and mark as done because there's a lot of y'all and only one of me. So I will see y'all next time for chapter 3.